Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a seriously fascinating journey. We're going to start right in your pocket, looking at the psychology of your personal wallet, and scale all the way up to international diplomacy and constitutional law. The big theme tying it all together? Control. We'll be connecting the dots between how our personal financial choices literally control our time, how national economies control their borders, and ultimately, the moral fabric holding democratic societies together. It's a massive journey, so let's just jump right in.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We'll kick off with the art of spending, then move into national economics and extradition, shift over to complex statecraft and diplomacy, explore constitutional morality and society, and wrap it all up with global news and numbers.
All right, Section 1, The Art of Spending, where we'll be navigating Morgan Housel's new book.
So, the absolutely crucial takeaway here. Wealth isn't actually about buying luxury goods or just endlessly piling up cash. It's really about buying freedom. It's about gaining control over your own time. Think about it. If you're working an 80-hour week to fund a lifestyle you literally have zero time to enjoy, are you truly free? Housel argues that the absolute highest dividend money can pay is just the ability to wake up and do what you want, when you want, with whoever you want.
And you can see exactly how this builds across Housel's 15 levels of financial independence. True wealth, it's really a spectrum of gaining control. You start out at level 0, which is total vulnerability and dependence. But as you build good habits, you hit level 6. You've got some savings, you're avoiding that toxic credit card debt, and you finally have a hand on the steering wheel. Eventually, the goal is to hit level 15. At that point, debt doesn't dictate your options anymore, and you've unlocked total autonomy. You've essentially beat the game.
Now, this highlights a massive psychological gap. Think about the difference between the money we spend to quietly improve our own lives versus the money we just burn to impress other people. Utility spending is durable, right? It solves actual problems. But status spending, man, that's a race with no finish line. It relies totally on external validation, which makes your happiness uniquely fragile. There's always going to be someone with a flashier car or a bigger house. So honestly, true indifference to other people's opinions, that is a massive form of hidden wealth.
Moving on to Section 2, National Economics and Extradition. We're looking at money and law across borders.
Okay, let's zoom out to the national level. The Reserve Bank of India is actually adjusting its cross-border policies to strengthen economic ties with Nepal. By allowing Indian banks to lend rupees directly to non-residents in Nepal, they're stepping in to ease working capital shortages for Nepalese businesses. And what's brilliant is that this maintains the stability of their historical fixed exchange rate, that's 1.6 Indian rupees to Nepalese rupees, while actively reducing their reliance on the US dollar for bilateral trade. It's a textbook example of how states actively manage tools of economic control.
But what happens when individuals exploit that financial system and then just flee across borders? Well, bringing them back becomes a massive priority for national economic security. Check this out. A staggering 35% of all individuals extradited to India since 2002 are actually economic offenders. They're wanted for financial fraud and cheating. I mean, if people can steal millions and just hop across a line in the sand to get away with it, the whole system just breaks down, right?
And as you can see, the pursuit of these fugitives has seen a massive recent surge. Look at 2024 alone. An absolutely unprecedented 39 extradition requests were made globally. This data really highlights a highly coordinated international effort to bring these rule breakers back to face trial. It proves that financial accountability increasingly has no borders.
Which brings us to Section 3, Complex Statecraft and Diplomacy. Subtitle, Balancing Security and Domestic Politics. Let's impartially map out a really complex diplomatic tightrope. India's engagement with the Taliban represents a highly calculated realpolitik maneuver. Basically, that means it's politics driven by hard, practical objectives rather than moral ideals. See, India is deeply concerned about China's growing footprint in the region, and they absolutely have to ensure Afghanistan doesn't become a base for anti-India terrorist activity. But engaging with a regime that has a history like the Taliban's 1996 rule and such an oppressive ideology, that is a massive test of strategic pragmatism versus moral clarity. And it gets even more complicated when domestic optics, like a Taliban minister visiting a prominent Indian seminary in Deoband, spark really intense internal debate. So that brings us to a super fascinating question about domestic politics. When external pressure mounts, how do internal political and institutional alliances actually hold together? Because, let's face it, navigating complex foreign policy is basically impossible if your internal governance is fracturing.
We see these internal governance dynamics play out in very different ways. Take the recent Bihar elections. Both the NDA and Mahagathbandhan alliances really struggled with leadership clarity and internal divisions, facing a major crisis of public skepticism. Or look at the scientific community. The Rashtriya Vigyan Puruskar Science Awards recently faced intense scrutiny, with scientists demanding transparency in the centralized selection process to ensure political ideology doesn't overshadow scientific merit. It really just goes to show that no matter how powerful a nation is globally, it's really only as strong as the trust in its internal gears.
All right, Section 4, Constitutional Morality and Society, the ethos of a democratic state. To understand how societies actually survive these internal strains, we have to look at the underlying rules of the state. As fiercely debated by B.R. Ambedkar, constitutional morality isn't just about written laws in a book. It's this vital, actively cultivated habit of fairness that keeps a democracy functioning. Ambedkar famously warned that democracy in India was really only a top dressing on undemocratic soil. What he meant was that this morality has to be continuously nurtured by citizens, lawmakers, and judges, so state actions remain just and ethical, rather than just caving to whatever the transient majoritarian sentiment happens to be.
To ground this concept geographically, let's look at recent events in Odisha, which have severely tested the region's historical social harmony. It really shows us exactly what happens when that fabric of constitutional morality gets strained on the ground.
Impartially speaking, these recent communal clashes during Durga Puja and Kathak represent a very significant administrative challenge. It's a real setback to the state's historically peaceful, secular ethos, marking the first major violence of this scale there since all the way back in 1992. 40 shops were burnt down in Darga Bazaar, leading to curfews and arrests. It's just a stark, real-world example of why social harmony and constitutional morality require ceaseless, active protection from both the public and the administration. Okay, moving into our final segment. Section 5, Global News in Numbers. A rapid-fire snapshot. Let's synthesize what's going on globally using pure data. Take a look at the stark contrast in these numbers. We've got over 20,000 teachers in India assigned to zero-enrollment schools, which really highlights some massive administrative inefficiencies. Then, in Djibouti, you have 65 parliamentarians lifting age limits, effectively paving the way for a sixth presidential term. On a more positive note, we see 31 lives miraculously rescued by the Coast Guard in the Arabian Sea, and exactly 100 public works offices digitized in Himachal Pradesh, in a major drive for better governance. Of course, at the ground level, it's everyday challenges that impact citizens the most. This letter to the editor demands better wheelchair assistance at railway stations. And it's a brilliant reminder that a state's prosperity is ultimately measured by how accessible its infrastructure actually is for the elderly, the sick, and the physically disabled. But we also see these incredible moments of natural beauty and regional pride captured in our sources, like this striking observation of hornbills in their natural habitat. It's a great reminder that amidst all this complex statecraft and heavy economic data, protecting the natural environment is still a completely fundamental responsibility of global governance.
And it's always incredible to look back through the archives, looking at historical infrastructure, like the incredibly ceremonious 1925 opening of the Khyber Railway, or the 1975 moment when oil was struck in Karsang, Arunachal Pradesh, which massively boosted self-sufficiency. These milestones remind us that the massive economic systems we rely on today were all built on the bold decisions of the past. So, having journeyed all the way from the intimate psychology of your personal wallet right up to the foundational morality of the state, I want to leave you with this final thought. How will your everyday choices shape the complex systems around you? Are you spending your money to buy actual freedom or just chasing fragile status? Are you actively nurturing the constitutional morality of your own community? The systems we explored today are absolutely massive, but remember, they all start with you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll see you next time.